The Homeland security person came in and was talking about the other cop who was there in Tennessee about his report. And well, it's hearsay on hearsay. See, it's a detention hearing, Judge. It's not a trial. You even admitted it was preponderance of the evidence was a standard, and it's a very low standard, and the government met it, obviously.
Do you know?
And you're trying to play a gotcha question at a budget hearing when you have murders left and right in your state, violent crimes, and we are doing everything we can to help your liberal state.
Oh! Are you going to recommend any ethics guidelines to make sure that foreign influence does not find its way in through the doors of the White House?
How do you characterize foreigners, the illegal aliens that have flowed into our country? Is that who you're talking about?
You remember Reid Hoffman, that billionaire guy who's a Democrat super freak? Well, he helped to fund, according to much reporting, E. Jean Carroll's lawsuit. Remember the woman who said that Trump Bergdorfed her in a dressing room at Bergdorf's, that whole stupid case that was also brought in New York, that was engineered by George Conway, Roberta Kaplan, and this psycho woman who painted her trees blue. Well, that same guy, Reid Hoffman, the same dude who was a real big pal of Epstein, flying to his island back and forth, he's admitted all that. And now, turns out, he's helping to fund a law firm that supports and represents Kilmar, wife beater, Abrego, Garcia. Saying Hecker and Fink, the New York law firm that just got brought on to represent Kilmar, was paid $7 million by a nonprofit created by LinkedIn co-founder called Reid Hoffman. Democrat freak. The money was earmarked to fund the lawsuits by former advice columnist E. Jean Carroll against Trump, right? Guy dropped $7 million to go fund a lawsuit to go after Trump. Now, as the Tennessee Star reported, Abrego Garcia on Tuesday submitted a legal filing, which told the clerk he's got a new lawyer, including Rasco Dean of a Nashville law firm. Now, previously known, right, they changed their names, as Kaplan, Hecker, and Fink until Roberta Kaplan departed amid reported acrimony, and Roberta Kaplan was the one who represented E. Jean Carroll. Hecker and Fink in 2020 got $7 million from American Future Republic, which they make just these fake names. It's like really like a communist Democrat dumpster fire is the people who are behind it. They call it American Future Republic. You're trying to institute a communist hellhole. The nonprofit organization established by LinkedIn founder. The money from Hoffman's group was labeled as public interest litigation funding. Yeah. Was used to fund the lawsuits by Carroll against Trump. I mean, is that in compliance with all of these financial requirements? He fills out a list of public interest litigation funding. And is he claiming that as some sort of like a nonprofit or some sort of a 501c3 or 501c4 that is given certain protections under the law? It's not public interest litigation. $7 million. It's to fund a private party's lawsuit against a political opponent. It's not public interest litigation. Now, Carroll, who wrote nationally distributed advice column for decades, got an $83 million judgment against Trump. Remember that, for the Bergdorfing? And sources familiar with the case confirmed to the Tennessee Star on Thursday that Hecker and Fink is representing Abrego Garcia on a pro bono basis. Yeah, right. But said the law firm did not receive financial support prior to taking the case because they're full up. As the Star noted, Hecker and Fink website said, we've got a substantial interest and commitment in lawyering public interest. Yeah. Star additionally understands that they were asked to represent Abrego and that their entry to the case was they got to find somebody in Nashville who's from, well, we're not from there, we're from New York. So they actually went and got somebody, hired this person, and as we know, he was pulled over there in Tennessee. This report coming from the Tennessee Star. So Reid Hoffman and the Democrats are funding the law firm. The reason the law firm just came in, like, well, just handle it pro bono, because they got a bunch of money left over. And you can see the Democrats are funding illegal aliens and their law firms now because they hate America, clearly. Now, Trump submitted this in the criminal case that was brought against Kilmar, Abrego, Garcia, and we were having this battle over this release order, right? The judge ordered Kilmar to be released because he's not going to be released. He's already in federal custody for his immigration violations. And Trump was fighting this, asked for a stay. Trump wrote this, says, as an initial matter, it's clear that this judge is going to order the release of Kilmar. Like, we know. We're asking for a stay. It's obvious she's going to do this. We don't even care. We know she's doing it, but we're just going to write this. Her memo opinion denies our motion and grants his release. Now, you said a hearing will come separately and more. Now, in other words, this judge, writes Trump, has already decided that he will be released on conditions. You're just having a hearing to talk about the mechanism of release. So to argue to say this is not ripe for review, you've already decided, and you're saying there's going to be another hearing on it, but since that decision has been made, we're now appealing it and we want to stay and all these things. And so during our initial motion, we described that despite strong evidence to the contrary, this lower level judge found that Trump was not entitled to a detention hearing for Kilmar. Just let him go. In any event, placing conditions on him is going to be a big problem. The guy's a gangbanger, beat his wife, allegedly according to her, and had MS-13 tattoos on his his hand, was trafficking humans according to Tennessee police, was called, FBI let him go. A legitimate concern to release him. Now, despite allegations to the contrary, we've described the grounds for a stay, why you should not order him released. But in her opinion, the judge acknowledged and rejected that other case. Watkins has been followed in many other districts, but she didn't care. In reaching this conclusion, we submit that the magistrate judge placed a larger burden on the government than the law requires or is even common practice. We talked about this when we read through her order. Imagine if this judge wrote a 50-page brief to defend your loved one when they were charged with some crime. Never would happen, because citizens don't get any benefits, only illegals do. There is no question that the government bears the burden at a detention hearing, and we have not proceeded otherwise. But the federal rules don't give you the right to require us to meet a higher standard than normal. Like, we know the standard's high. We're talking about keeping someone in custody, but we met that clearly. The law is overwhelming on this case. And the government didn't need to call any witnesses at a detention hearing, but can proceed by proffer, which has been done in all of these other cases. So the judge was like, well, there's hearsay on hearsay. Like, the Homeland security person came in and was talking about the other cop who was there in Tennessee about his report. Like, well, it's hearsay on hearsay. Say it's a detention hearing, judge. It's not a trial. You even admitted it was preponderance of the evidence was a standard, and it's a very low standard, and the government met it, obviously. Despite this well-accepted precedent regarding evidence at detention hearings, which even other judges recognized, she ruled the other way. She cited no precedent for this proposition, but she just did it. So the United States at a detention hearing must move by a preponderance of the evidence. Very low standard. In fact, the lowest of the standards, to show that it involved a minor victim. And then remember, she also said, well, what does involve mean? Like, I don't know, having a kid on your floorboards as you're trafficking them into the United States to be sold off into some psycho's custody? That involves a minor. And she said, well, I guess what if a person is transporting seafood across state lines and their son doesn't have a seatbelt on? Is that trafficking humans involving a minor? No. He was doing it with illegal aliens, taking them from Mexico into Maryland, filling up his car, stacking bodies in the back. To be sure, the evidence at a detention hearing must be competent and reliable. That's what we brought. But it doesn't need to be the same as a jury trial. Indeed, at a detention hearing, such evidence doesn't even need to be offered via testimony as a basis. Just a proffer can be sufficient. There's no support in any law that we have to call one witness that you wanted to hear. Now, the United States has cited many examples, but the judge doesn't care. At the detention hearing, we argued that laying aside the fact that he would almost certainly be taken into immigration custody if released, he was a serious risk of flight, because while on his theoretical release, we'd have a strong incentive to flee, because we're going to send him back to El Salvador. Now, the United States stands by the argument before this court that in the universe where he is released at liberty and not to immigration custody, he has connections to an immigration international smuggling ring and connections to a transnational criminal organization, both of whom could be positioned to assist him in evading our custody. And we can't try a fugitive, and so you keep him in custody. However, it is an accepted fact that if in this case, if Kilmar is released from custody, from the U.S. Marshal's custody, he will not be released at liberty, but rather into the custody of the United States ICE. And Abrego may agree in this case that he's going to remain in custody regardless of what happens here. But nevertheless, if you send him to ICE, then we might not have our criminal component of this being met. If he's moved to ICE, if he's deported, then our prosecution is harmed. This would be irreparable to the harm to the public. He committed crimes in our country. We actually don't want him deported. So the DOJ has a little bit of a conflict with Homeland. Homeland wants this dude gone. That's their mission. Illegal in our country, get him out, put him in prison elsewhere, get him out of here. Criminal justice says this guy has to pay a penalty to America. He's going to come here, face our jury, get convicted, and go to our prisons and sit there for trafficking kids throughout our country. So if Homeland is now able to deport this dude, we don't get that justice. How fast the defendant could or would be deported remains to be seen. In candor with this court, such a potential deportation would not be instantaneous. How fast those proceedings could move are difficult to predict, but it could be harm if he's gone. Now, to the contrary, a stay does not substantially injure him. He's not getting out of custody anyways, and so he can be here a bit longer. And the parties will only be maintained in the status quo, and there's not going to be any harm by just keeping him in custody. So this court has previously issued stays to preserve the status quo in many other cases, and you can do the same here. And other judges are going to be on this case soon. You're just a low-level magistrate judge. And finally, we respectfully submit the public interest lies in a resolution of not only whether the analysis of the judge is sound, but also in a resolution of this case itself. If he's deported by another agency, Homeland, because they're following federal law, we, the public, would be deprived of a resolution of the charges. A meaningful resolution of these charges is important to the public, and so therefore, the court should stay your order to release this Kilmar. And the judge, of course, denied that. She says, actually, no. For the reasons set forth, the government's motion for a stay of the release order is denied. And she writes that the government's motion for revocation, the court will hold an evidentiary hearing on July 16th. Here, let's just take a quick look at what she wrote. She says, underlying this case is an obvious truism that must not be forgotten. The executive branch is in control. Okay, so she doesn't care if it's Homeland or DOJ. That's overlooked. So she's just saying, well, it's no problem. Homeland can just coordinate with justice, then not deport him. And so there's no harm here. So this court doesn't need to recite the background here, nor do we. After reviewing the evidence, we issued our order. She concluded that no detention hearing is authorized under the Bail Reform Act because you failed to prove your case, saying it wasn't a minor victim and there is no serious risk of Kilmar. Gives us the standard and says, well, the standard is low, but the judge articulated an exception and saying it's not authorized and said here, the government here, based on her ruling and the government's briefing, the court understands the government's motion for a revocation of this challenge is this, a certain part of her analysis. And so we'll go through it here. He writes, the government challenges this because he's a flight risk, saying you can't let him go. And the judge is giving us a lot of language to not say much. As the judge explained, a potential risk of flight is different from a risk of non-appearance. And we're going to split this into different bits. As an initial matter, the magistrate judge may be correct in the nature of the charges against him do not infer that he's got a greater risk of flight. And his detention also does not make him a risk of flight. And so accordingly, the court finds the government has not shown it's likely to succeed, that he is a risk of flight, which is just crazy. He's an illegal alien. All right, so you see the judge is going to be denying it. In conclusion, Waverly D. Crenshaw says because the government has not made a strong showing required to justify the grant of the stay is denied and the release will continue, I guess. So now, again, Homeland will just pick him up, and so he's not going to be out running free. But we got into it in the Senate today about judges like this and how they can just create corrupt and perverted outcomes for their favored clients. You could never imagine, right? Any criminal defense attorney or any prosecutor is reading this stuff going, wow, you're kidding me. These judges are bending over backwards on behalf of a criminal defendant who's an illegal alien who is charged with human trafficking of minors with other co-conspirators testifying about that in a grand jury proceeding brought by the federal government. Bending over backwards to say that they're not meeting the standard for this dude is wild times. So we've got questions about this in Congress. Will Congress do anything about it? Well, one thing that they're doing is trying to get Emil Bove confirmed into the Court of Appeals. And we would love that to happen. Now, Pencil Neck Schiff got into it with him today. Of course, Emil Bove was one of Trump's prior attorneys. We saw him in court in the Judge Mercan case many times. And so he's been getting into it with Pencil Neck. And before we listen to this clip, a little bit of background on this, because the New York Times shared this letter from that poison pill attorney that we talked about, who I think is either a poison pill or he's just a moron. But he came out, and the reason I say that is because he admitted in court to Judge Zenas that Kilmar should not have been deported to El Salvador. All you got to do is read the order, which I'll admit I didn't catch the first time we read it, so it took 2 readings of it. But you read it, it says Guatemala, doesn't say El Salvador. And Iraz Ruvani could have come in and made that argument like any competent lawyer. Even if it's not the right argument, you could have made the argument and lost on that basis rather than going in and just bending the knee and conceding defeat. It was a pathetic thing to do, which made us believe that he's a poison pill and that after he did this poisoning, he was going to come out, hire some sort of accountability project to come in here and blow the whistle on it and make a whole career out of himself to oppose Trump. And that's exactly what's happening, as we can see. So Iraz Ruvani is this attorney who was fired, the poison pill attorney in the Kilmar case, who has now basically wrecked, I think, the entire case since the DOJ has adopted his mistake. Now Emil Bove is trying to get nominated and confirmed to the Court of Appeals and got into it today. There was a whole letter that was sent out of Iraz Ruvani, a nonpartisan, zealous advocate with a distinguished service at the DOJ, right? And this dude is so proud of himself that he even submitted photos of his stuff. Here's this one from 2017. Special commendation to Iraz Ruvani. Protecting the nation from foreign terrorist entry. He's an executive order litigation team for outstanding service. Nice little plaque there. Here's another one. Put this one on his refrigerator. Civil Division Perseverance Award. Climb a mountain. Presented to Iraz. He's on the Sanctuary Cities team. Yeah, 2019. We'll see if he's ever climbed a mountain in his life. Here's another one. Special commendation. COVID-19 Immigration Litigation Response Team. Outstanding service. 2020. And another one is a letter, which is from Drew, saying, we're going to nominate him to this certain position recently because he's amazing. Turns out he gets into this position and, in my opinion, wrecks the case case. He explains why he raised concerns about gang affiliation, and they gave us a bunch of detail on that, but we've read the case and know the charges. We know exactly what's going on. And what's so funny about this is this guy's story is sort of modified a bit. Will Chamberlain says it's interesting that he's now going to write this like 30-page brief about how bad the case is, and all of it got released at the same time that Emil Bove is testifying, right? So it's just a hit job on Emil Bove, and it's trying to wreck and stall Trump's execution of immigration law, which has been marginally effective, actually. But here's what Will Chamberlain says. It's interesting that Rouvani now claims that the administration removed aliens pursuant to the AEA in violation of court orders. It's weird. In violation of court orders? That's strange because he signed his name right there on this document, Iraz Rouvani, signing off on this conclusion, saying the court should discharge the order to show cause because we have complied with the court's orders in this case. And if you disagree with that, then we can brief it later, right? And saying here that we have been in compliance, and Iraz is now changing his tune in a way to attack Trump's nominee, Emil Bove. And so Emil was in Congress today, and he was getting into it with pencil neck shifty shift. And here's what it sounded like. Emil Bove, Trump's former attorney, getting into it with pencil neck shift, the biggest pencil neck of all in Congress.
Senator, I have no recollection of saying anything of that kind. To the extent I used...
Didn't you recall, Mr. Bove, if you said...
Warning, F-bombs, earmuffs.
Or suggested during a meeting with Justice Department lawyers, maybe they should consider telling the court, fuck you? It seems to me that would be something you'd remember, unless that's the kind of thing you say frequently.
Well, I've certainly said things encouraging litigators at the department to fight hard for valid positions that we have to take in defense of our clients.
And have you frequently suggested that they say fuck you and ignore court orders? Is that also something you frequently do, such you might not remember doing it on this occasion?
Potty mouth
and
shit.
as I explained, I have never directed...
So did you or did you not make those comments during that meeting?
Which comments, Senator?
You really need me to repeat it? Did you suggest,
like to say it,
as Mr. Rouvani wrote, that DOJ would need to consider telling the courts fuck you and ignore any such court order?
I did not suggest that there would be any need to consider ignoring court orders. At the point of that meeting, there were no court orders to discuss.
Well, did you suggest telling the courts fuck you in any manner?
I don't recall.
You just don't remember that. Well, let me ask you this. It also says in the complaint, Bove indicated and stressed to all in attendance that the planes needed to take off no matter what. These are the planes that a judge was ordering not be used to render people to a maximum security prison outside the country. Did you say during that meeting, did you stress to all in attendance that the planes needed to take off no matter what?
Senator, your characterization is not accurate.
It's not my characterization. It's the characterization of a decorated prosecutor who was in that meeting. Are you saying that he's lying?
Yes.
As I said at the beginning of the hearing...
No, I'm not interested in what you said at the beginning of the hearing. I'm interested in whether you stressed to people in attendance that the planes needed to take off no matter what. Did you say that?
I certainly conveyed the importance of the upcoming operation.
Well, don't paraphrase here. Did you tell people in attendance the planes needed to take off no matter what?
I don't recall the specific words that I used.
Wouldn't you recall saying that if you had instructed that the planes needed to take off no matter what, including whether the court ordered otherwise? You wouldn't remember that?
This is a mischaracterization, Senator. There were no court orders at this point.
Well, there was a court order, wasn't there?
No,
wasn't there a court order by Judge Boasberg, if not in this specific case, then in related cases, that people not be sent out of the country until the court could rule? Wasn't there a court order?
Not at the time of that meeting, Senator.
Did you participate in the decision not to disseminate that oral court order prior to the written court order to other agencies so those planes would not take off, so those planes would turn around? Were you involved in the decision to withhold that court order from the responsible agencies?
I think it's clear that I participated
Yes or no?
I participated in this matter, and I'm not going to get into the contents of legal advice. I did over the course of time, as many lawyers have.
No, I'm not interested in over the course of time. I'm interested in whether you participated in the willful violation of court orders as alleged in this complaint. Let me ask you this, Mr. Bove, if there are notes of that meeting, will you provide them to this committee?
I defer to the committee and to the executive branch on the procedure.
And if the committee requests them, will you provide those notes to the committee?
I defer to the executive branch on the handling of that request.
And let me ask you about notes from another meeting, which you're contesting here, and that is the meeting over the decision to dismiss the case in New York, the corruption case against the mayor of New York. According to Ms. Sassoon, the U.S. attorney at the time, during the meeting with Adams' attorneys, where she described Adams' attorneys repeatedly urging what amounted to a quid pro quo, that you admonished one of the lawyers in the room to stop taking notes. Is that true?
I don't believe I instructed that attorney to stop taking notes. I did remark on the fact that he was taking extensive notes, yes.
And why did it concern you that he was taking notes of that meeting?
Because at that point in the meeting, we were discussing who was responsible for media leaks, and I was making the point that only the prosecutors had created an extensive record that could support report detailed leaks.
And you were concerned, were you, that information about this potential quid pro quo might become public? Was that the concern?
I've explained that there was no quid pro quo.
Will you provide the notes of that meeting, which you, according to the U.S. Attorney, instructed be collected at the end of the meeting?
I think a member of my staff may have given that instruction outside my presence, and I defer to the committee and the executive branch on records requests and how those should be handled.
Well, I would request that we seek these records, which go to the truthful.
You're not getting those records. Those are executive privileged, and they were from the DOJ, so they're not giving them to you. So enjoy it, pencil neck. He getting into it with Emil Bove. And let us not forget that pencil neck is censured. Only a handful of congresspeople in American history have been so pathetic and deserving of this censure, and he's one of them. And now he's very nervous that the Trump DOJ, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, Pam Bondi, hopefully Congress through the Inquisition into the auto pen, and the rest of the Democrat NGO, USAID, all of the floodgates open. Pencil neck is caught right in the middle of it. So he seems a little bit nervous out there, as he should be. But we also saw acting ICE director was in here. They were getting into it over the Kilmar case. Here's what he said recently.
You know, we do have a list of several high-profile countries that are considered high risk that we are focused on, that we want to go ahead and make sure we find those individuals that came here in the United States without any type of vetting or without any proper vetting or who snuck in. We want to make sure that we're protecting Americans here on American soil. And that's one of the key things ICE is doing, is preventing these incidents before anything bad does happen.
All right, so that's ICE acting director. And we also saw Pam Bondi got into it today as well. And so she was in there asking about why this individual called Senator Jeff Merkley is asking about Trump's meme coins when he's got the leader of the Sinaloa drug cartel living in his district. From Pam Bondi today.
Their foreign interests attending that dinner.
Senator, we're here to talk about the Department of Justice and my budget for the upcoming year.
Yeah.
I would think
Pay
that
attention.
you would want to talk about the leader of the Sinaloa cartel who was living in Oregon, one of the top leaders. I would think that that's what you would want to talk about.
He's in
with
Oregon?
me. When we captured him, he had $3 million cash in his home.
Attorney General, I know that you avoided the same question on the House side, but what we know is that many folks who attended this dinner were buying those coins because they wanted to influence U.S. policy. We had Mr. Javier Selgas, the head of Freight Technology, Inc., who said, I bought $2 million of these coins. I plan to buy $20 million because I want a favor from the president to change the policy regarding freight from Mexico to the United States.
Okay, he can say whatever he wants, and he can participate just like any other Democrat can participate in any other person's businesses or projects or the Clinton Global Initiative or handing out Obama $100 million deals for Netflix or whatever he got. All of it, right? We all know how Hillary Clinton went around getting $400,000 for little crap speeches, and the Clintons destroyed Haiti and other things. So, like, we get the gist of it. They have like a same template that they just kind of reuse in certain things. One, it's crypto. The other one from Schiff. Give me the notes. Give me the notes. They always say, give me the notes.
This solicitation of investments in his personal product, his meme coin, led to many people who were coming from foreign countries attending that dinner. Don't you think the American people have a right to know? And you said yourself, you're very concerned about foreign influence on our government.
Senator, it is wildly offensive that you would accuse President Trump of not protecting American interest in our country when he is the president that has shut down our borders,
Yes,
unlike
Senator.
Joe Biden. President Trump has done everything
instead
to
of
make
changing
America
the
safe,
topic,
and you
you
asked me
actually
the
answer the
question,
question.
and keep America safe.
Do you
and
know
you're trying to
if-
play a gotcha question at a budget hearing when you have murders left and right in your
fired up.
state, violent crimes, and we are doing everything we can to help your liberal state. Whether you're liberal or not, we're going to do everything we can to help the citizens of your state. And you're trying to avoid that because you're trying to play a gotcha question with the President of the United States, and it's not going to work. We're here to talk about our
Mr.
budget
Chairman,
for public safety.
I do believe that as the leader of the Department of Justice, you should be concerned about foreign influence. There was obviously a lot of foreign influence and individuals who said they were there for that reason. And so will you appoint a special investigator to make sure that that foreign influence does not...
Yeah, maybe they should find out about the foreign influence from Hunter Biden and his $500,000 crap paintings. And look, I know some people have seen like the more recent paintings and they're like, wow, they're nice. Go look at what he was doing originally, okay, before he hired a ghost painter. They were COVID mucus paintings. They look like a bowl of moldy milk out there that you left in your sink with college roommates. Disgusting. Now they're not being sold for anything. No one wants to buy his crap little finger paints because it was access to the White House for a demented person who we don't even know it was functional or valid when signing auto pen documents. So spare me the lecture on any of this stuff.
Not affect the policies of the United States of America.
I'm not going to tell you what I will or will not do, other than
Good.
I will do everything to keep the people of your state safe, even though you don't want to talk about anything to do with your state because of the crime in your state. You also voted no on the Laken Riley Act. We are doing everything we can to protect the citizens of this country. You also said that President Trump encouraged protests. It was the opposite. He's done everything he can to keep us safe, and he will continue to,
I think
as well as the Department of
speaks
Justice.
volumes that you won't answer the question about transparency when the president is asking people to invest in his company and his products, and that foreigners are attending these events. I think transparency would be appropriate. Are you going to recommend any ethics guidelines to make sure that foreign influence does not find its way in through the doors of the White House?
How do you characterize foreigners, the illegal aliens that have flowed into our country? Is that who you're talking about? You don't want to talk about them.
No,
you
he
don't
doesn't.
want to talk about the crime
They
that
love
has
them.
gone rampant throughout this country and your state.
Well, you know, these hearings are a chance for us to ask questions, and I assure you I'm engaged in national security in many, many ways. But this also I am concerned about. And let me turn to a different piece of the puzzle, because the president also has another cryptocurrency called USD1. It is a stable coin. There was a request by UAE.
They're so
to
mad they
produce
didn't get
AI
in on the
chips
crypto
that would
game.
go to UAE. The national security advisor of UAE is also the CEO of MGX. So after that request for those chips occurred, MGX then said, we will buy 2 billion with a B, of the president's coins. And then the president went to the Middle East and said, we will get you those AI chips. Is this sequence of events in which a foreign government asked for a big favor, and we had previously banned these chips to UAE because of the national security concerns. Then they buy $2 billion of the president's coins, and then the president goes to the Middle East and says, we will provide those chips. Does that sequence of events concern you about foreign influence on the United States of America?
No, maybe he should have just sent $80 billion in a pallet of cash and dropped it on the Iranians' doorstep. Is that what you're concerned about?
The foreign influence on America that I would be concerned about if I were you was the Mexican national that resided in Oregon, who we just arrested, who had 384 pounds of methamphetamine. The foreign individual who I would be concerned about if I were a senator from Oregon is the Honduran drug trafficker who is residing in Portland for distributing fentanyl. The foreign national I would be concerned about if I was an Oregon senator is a Mexican national leader of a drug trafficking ring. Another one, fentanyl, firearms, fatal overdoses, all in your state.
All voters.
You've made your point.
57,700 fentanyl pills and stolen firearms in Oregon. That's what we should work together on, not gotcha questions during a budget
Let me
hearing on
recognize
public
Senator
safety.
Merkley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Attorney General certainly has made the point that she's very concerned about issues that I'm concerned about.
You're not. You're concerned about finding stuff to dunk on Trump. But Pam Bondi delivering the ruckus out there along with Emil Bove, and we're excited to see it happening. So the senators out there getting a little bit of taste of some competence and some judicial reform coming soon. And so we're going to keep our eye on this. We'll see what happens in the Kilmar case. Thank you for subscribing and joining as we do.